Welcome to the Live Experience podcast. I'm Joel Kleber, and on today's episode, this is a video episode, which is audio as well. So you're listening to that now as audio, but it's also on YouTube if you want to see the slides that I made with this episode, and I talk my way through it. And it's basically entitled "Why I Reconnected with My Father After 22 Years" is the episode. So for anyone who follows me online, they would have seen a picture recently with my dad. And a bit of a story about it. Due to character limits, I couldn't go into too much detail about it. So this episode, I want to provide a lot of detail for you, the audience. And just look, the reason why I'm doing this is because it's not to share everything about me and all that sort of stuff, but it's because if someone like me can do this, anyone can do it. And I really, truly mean that. And there's a lot of people in your lives, you might have fractured relationships or things that are just stupid. And it just takes all this time in this vortex. And as time goes like this, you're stuck here worrying about things over here. So I'm just going to talk you through it, and hopefully you will learn something from it. As I said, if you are listening, you can watch this as a video, and it has slides as well with it. So let's get into it. Look, let's start with why we're estranged. So on the screen, here's a picture of myself and my mum in front of our house in Perth. Now, for those who don't know, my mum had bipolar disorder 1, and great mother, fantastic mother, I miss her a lot. But, she was in and out of psychiatric wards and didn't manage her condition too well. And my dad, rather than taking the responsibility of looking after her, he created a lot of headaches. So I remember when they were home all the time, there was this massive fights all the time, huge fights. And it eventually led to him getting a job because he couldn't handle with it in Saudi Arabia. So basically he got a job with in Saudi Arabia doing the mobile telephone networks for the king at the time, and basically just came back 2 weeks a year to play dad. So he's over there choosing his job to gallivant around Saudi Arabia, and he's left myself, my younger sister, and with my mum. And, for me, that was very negligent in itself because, he knew what my mum's condition was, and when she got really unwell, it was not good. But saying that, she was well most of the time, so it wasn't overly a big concern for us. But when she got unwell, she did go to the psychiatric ward quite often. That was the one in Perth, Greylands at the time. And also when she came back to Warrnambool, in the Warrnambool one as well. So he knew about that, but he still chose to go for the job over the family, which there are reasons which I know why now, which I'm going to tell you at the end. But at the time, it was very hard to reconcile. And what was even worse is that when she went into psychiatric wards because she was unwell, because she was high and manic, he knew we were in foster care. So he was over in Saudi Arabia or didn't want to leave his job and decided to have us, his kids, be put into foster care so he could continue working. And, and to his credit, he did send a little bit of money to the people who were looking after us. But, pretty much at the time, it felt like he abandoned us. So our mum's in a psychiatric ward. No one explained whatever was going on. Like, it never said to us, it wouldn't be like what it was now. If it was like what it was now, I'm sure we'd get a lot more care and explanation to us. But we didn't. So, it was very hard for us to reconcile that whilst mum was in hospital unwell for 3 months at a time or more, that he would not come back and look after us. So it was very, very hard from a trust perspective. And from then on, when he didn't come back that first time, knowing where we were, for me, it was sort of just like a line through him. So, as I said, very hard to reconcile as a child, and it still is. And this is part of the reason why I haven't spoken to him or didn't reconnect to him for a very long time, is because, as I said, I'm not a father yet, but I can imagine if I was and this sort of thing happened and I was in his position, I would have, as I said to him, I would have taken a job at McDonald's, would have brick his labour or whatever it was, just so I could look after my kids, and that's my responsibility. And he chose not to for other reasons, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So very hard to reconcile. It's sort of something I'm slowly getting over with. But the problem with this sort of stuff, and I was listening to a book by Gabor, I think his name is Mate, and there's so much stuff that goes back to childhood trauma. And a lot of people say, get everyone's this and that and get over it. But it forms who you are. There's no two ways about it. So for me, having my dad abandon us and not come back and look after us, it did affect me. It affected a lot of behaviors, the way I act. A lot of my personality traits that I have now have come back from that moment. So it is something that's serious, and people don't resolve it, and it turns into issues like alcoholism, drugs, together pain, whatever it is, right? So this sort of actions, right, they do have a lasting and long effect on you. And, there's a lot of these people who don't understand mental health, mental illness, and just think, toughen up or get over it. Well, end of the day, these traumas, everything is trauma-based, really. And these traumas that happen to people at their young age, adulthood, whatever, they really do affect your life. And it's not just as simple as putting a compartment in your brain and putting it to the side, because if people do that, that's fine, but it will come out in other ways. It certainly did for me. But that's something that really stuck with me, really hurt me. And it does, even now, I'm not going to say exactly the behaviors, but there are ways that I act in life. And this is not bad things, but they're just certain, not as a risk taker in terms of my profession and doing what I really want to do because I'm, a bit of trust issue, all this sort of stuff. So it does affect you, what I'm trying to say. So what basically changed? Well, Dad made his choice. He was over there, trying to earn money to send back to my mum, who would not spend it properly. And basically, we ended up losing the house, I think when I was 12 or 13. Really, really nice house, worth a fortune. Now we sold it for very cheap back then. And because he just didn't want to invest in the relationship anymore. He had a good life over there. We were sort of, I guess, the afterthought or the nuisance where he had to keep sending money via obligation, and then he eventually cut it off. But what happened was pretty simple. When my mum passed away on the 7th of February 2022, I was there with her by her bed every day. This is during COVID as well. So some days they tried to lock me out, but I got my way in the full mask and all that sort of stuff. But, for 4 weeks when she was made palliative, I was there with her every day. And I was sitting there the whole time and thinking about, well, why is this responsibility falling on me? It's not a burden. It was definitely not a burden. The best gift I could have given my mum was time. And, her life was very successful to me because there's a lot of rich people and older people who might have all the things in the world, but they die alone or they don't die with anyone around them. Whereas for my mum, she had a large amount of family with her every day. There was always something happening and she had people there and she knew that everyone loved her. And that to me is a successful and wealthy life. But, when I was there, I had a lot of time to think and, it was very hard as well. He knew what was going on at the time. I don't know if it was via me, but it might have been by someone else. And, I think he maybe reached out and he sort of went on a bit of a diatribe via text message about, this bloody ECT. I should never have let them do ECT on your mum and they should have done this and that. It's like, well, if that was the case, you should have stayed. So, I sort of have a bit of blame even towards this condition she's got here, which I'm going to go to the next slide here. So she developed a condition called PSP, which is progressive supranuclear palsy. And this come out of the blue. Google it. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it presents as Parkinson's, and it's a very, very insidious disease. I think she's had it for around 3 years, they thought, but she got diagnosed with it 6 months prior because we couldn't work out what was going on with her. And then, basically it was a really quick decline from there. And the problem with this is over the 3 years, she was declining, but because of COVID, I couldn't see her. So she was in a nursing home in Warrnambool. I couldn't go and see her. So I didn't know how bad it was. And then once we worked out what was going on, it was sort of like, cool, go down every weekend and see her as much as I can. And then towards the end, I was there every day for 4 weeks by the bedside. It was a horrible condition, PSP, Parkinson's or Parkinson's or whatever it's called. It was very much the hardest thing I've had to be through. She went from being a very active lady, walking around a very, very active social life to basically what you see here. And the reason why I took this picture is not because it's being morbid or anything. It's just because I want to show you when I do more of this stuff about this condition, what happens. And it's a very, very sad thing, and there's not much resources online about it. But it was very, very tough. It's probably the toughest thing I've been through. But just, as I said, the best thing you can do if you're ever in a position, let's say with palliative care, it's not about you, it's about the person. So a lot of times people go to me, I can't see your mum like this. Well, it's not about if you can't see her. It's about your strength to be there for that person because you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for yourself. So palliative care, I think, is a really underfunded and under-recognised area. And the understanding and caring from the nurses was fantastic. But yeah, it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. But this condition, PSP, look, the neuro scientist or surgeon or whoever it was at the time basically didn't know my mum's history, which is outstanding. Is for me, mind blog was my mind. So I had to fill him in on mum's history. For whatever reason, he didn't have it. And I had to fill him in about her bipolar disorder and, years of convulsive therapy and medications and stuff. He said, oh yeah, that would definitely have contributed to the atrophy of the brain. So, when my dad says to me, well, these bloody doctors with ECT and stuff, I was like, well, you could have done something to stop and you didn't. So I had this going on all at this time while I'm there sitting there, I'm copying messages and stuff about this sort of thing. So it was very, very hard and conflicting from both sides. Now, within 6 months of the diagnosis, she passed away, unfortunately. As I said, anyone who loses a parent will know it's the hardest thing I've ever been through, and I don't wish it on anyone, to be honest. It's inevitable, but it was the hardest thing I went through. And as I said, it was a very challenging time. During lockdown, she had this condition, which we didn't know. It doesn't present like something that you're going to know straight away. So she slowly deteriorated over time, random falls and things like that. But yeah, then after, things started getting really serious when we saw her wasting away and losing her mobility, which is very tough. But yeah, I wish I just had that time. A lot of people during the lockdown didn't have that time. But that was really, really, really tough. And it was really challenging for her as well. She was in a nursing home. She was very social still. But, we spoke on the phone every day pretty much. But very, very challenging time. Now, also, I was her carer as well. So I had to make a large amount of tough decisions. Give you an example. She kept going into hospital before she passed away. And, the doctors wanted to give her some surgeons wanted to give her some surgery for a gallbladder that kept getting infected. Now, very serious stuff. And I didn't know they'd call me up and say, what do you want to do? So these sorts of decisions fell to me. There wasn't overly much support from anyone in making those decisions. But in saying that, I had a really good girlfriend who is a nurse who would go through things with me, and also some family members as well. But I didn't have any support from my father at the time, who knew about everything that was going on. And I'll go on to palliative care a bit still. Look, there is no handbook when it comes to palliative care. Hardest thing I've definitely done has been there to support someone during that time. But as I said, it's the biggest gift you can give to someone. If you've got a dying relative or whatever, just being there and going there is really, really important. And as I said, I heard this comment a few times about, it's hard for me to see a thing like this. Well, it's not about, it's hard for you. It's hard for everyone else involved. It's about the person. So the person who has the condition or the illness is the priority. So you got to put your feelings aside for them. Now, as I said, my dad knew about this, still no real support, besides a couple of messages about, should have stopped ECT and all these bloody doctors and blaming the health system, all this sort of stuff, which is just excuses. But what happened for me was basically when Mum passed away on the 7th of the 2nd, I'll never forget that day. Biggest amount of pain I felt in my life. It's hard to describe. I don't think I'll ever feel a pain like that again. It's the worst thing I've ever felt. And if you've lost a parent or a loved one, I'm sure you can imagine it. But in relation to my dad, all my hate vanished. So I don't know why, but what happened was when my mum passed away, you realise, I've only got one parent now pretty quickly, right? So that relationship was obviously fractured. And it's something that I didn't want to keep fractured because, when you're faced with death and you sit next to someone who's dying every day, you realise how short life is. And I'm not going to go into the typical stuff that you hear about it. But for me, it was sort of like, well, a penny dropped and said, well, line drops in the sand. I've got one parent. It's on me to fix this if possible. So losing a parent, as I said, changes you. It changed me pretty much within that day. My anger and my hate towards him vanished. And I didn't want to die wondering as well. So my dad was a bit of a man of mystery. I had a lot of gaps in my knowledge about myself and about my half of that family. So my mum's side was one of 11 really good people, and I know all about that side, but I have no idea about my dad's side. So I want to know more a bit about it. So from a point of view, it was a bit more selfish, I guess, to reach out to him. But I just thought as well, he's 77. I just didn't want him to pass away and for me to not have any answers. So I started being active with communication. So for me, I've tried speaking to him in the past when I was very young and I was very hot-headed, and I used to threaten him and all this sort of stuff. If I see you again, I'm going to do this and all this sort of stuff, right? Not stuff that I'm proud of, but that's how I felt at the time. So the way I dealt with him is I would email and I would send WhatsApp messages. And then once I read the replies and didn't read too much into him, I sort of then made the decision to call him. And I called him for a bit and just sort of be proactive with it and stuff like that. And let him know that if you want to call me anytime, you can call me. So that was my invitation for him to call me. And in saying that, he didn't really call me. He'd always wait for me to call him first, which I understand why, because I was not very nice to him when I've called him previously. So this was a long, long, long time ago. So I imagine he had a bit of a sore taste in his mouth, and maybe the best thing he thought for me was just to leave me alone. And also, I had expectations of how this whole thing was going to go. So in your head, you have scenarios that are built up, like, might be, how's your first day of work going to go, or how's his first date going to go, whatever it is. So I had expectations of how my interactions with my father were going to go on the phone. I have all these things planned, and then as soon as I found out that was a bad idea, as soon as I tried to be real patient and stuff on the phone, I found myself, finding a lot of the stuff he said was very hard to not react to. So a lot of excuses, no apology, none of this. But as I said, this was all my expectations. They're my expectations of how the interaction should go, rather than just treating the interaction as an interaction and nothing more. But what I found real hard, and something I'm trying to do more now, is really practice empathy. Now, everyone says practicing empathy, but for me, it was extremely hard to do it with a person who walked out on his family and left them with a mother with a serious mental illness who was in and out of psychiatric ward. So for me, what excuse do you have, or how can I put myself in your position where I would think about doing the same thing and leaving the situation? So I tried that a bit and I came to a few conclusions, and one of the main conclusions was my mum was not easy to live with. Now, she was a great mother. She was really, really good. She was a brilliant mother to me. But when she went manic, or there could be times where she's very, very difficult. So, you're in a relationship with someone and you've got two young kids, and you've got, a mother with bipolar disorder who doesn't really do well to maintain her condition, or think she's even got a mental illness, which is most of the time. So it would have been very frustrating for him, which is why I can see when the job opportunity come up to go to Saudi Arabia, earn really, really good money, more than what he was doing in WA at the time. He did it, and he still saw himself as fulfilling his obligations because he was sending money back every month. So it was sort of good in a way as well, because when he was around, him and my mum would fight all the time. So when I look at it from that point of view, I sort of found myself being a lot more patient and not going to anger so quick. But then things changed when I started making contact back with him. I'll give you an example. My mum's had a funeral on. We had to organise it all. That was very, very tough. That was very, very tough to do that. But we organised a live stream for around $800 or $700, whatever it was. And the out-of-pocket funeral expenses were covered by myself and my sister. And he didn't offer to pay anything. He didn't offer to come over. And he watched the live stream of the eulogy. And the first thing he says to me was, "You speak too quick." And he criticised my way I spoke at the funeral, my eulogy. So the eulogy was something that I've said it a few times, but it was very, very hard to do. It was one of the hardest things I've had to do as well. I spent a lot of time with it, and I thought I did a good job. People told me I did a good job. It's not very often that someone's going to tell you did a bad job at a eulogy, but he did. So, you make this progress by making contact and calling him, and then you get something like that. It's very, very hard to keep you cool. I got really, really pissed off. I'm not going to lie to you. I got real, real angry, and I thought, stuff you, I'm just going to cut you off. That's it, done. But what I had to do is I had to try and look at it objectively, and I had to crack at him back in the message, and then he would go to me, "Oh, don't take it personal." Well, I'm like, "Well, hang on," blah, 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 and I let a bit out. So that put things back a bit. But what I tried to start learning is, look, 77 years old, this person is not going to change. They're not someone who's malleable and going to change all of a sudden who they are. A leopard can't change their spots, and that's the saying for a reason. So I just had to work with it. Look, he's going to say things to annoy me and bait me and drag me back into emotions I've got from over here, and I can't do that. So if I want to progress the relationship forward, I've just got to literally not listen to it, don't engage, and move forward no matter how much he baits me. And the thing is, he wasn't baiting me deliberately. It's just the way he is. He's emotionally very stunted, very cold. So it was not something where he meant to do it. It was just the way he is. And that's the thing. Accept people for what they are. Don't have expectations sometimes. And just in the interaction, you can be in there as much as you want or not. So I could pull myself into interaction by not reading the messages or not responding. If I wanted to put myself back in the interaction, I could call that person or I could respond back to him. So that's how I did it. But as I said, I'm a human. I got my blood boiling a few times with some of the stuff that was coming out of him. But look, over time, as we progressed, it took time. Time does heal some wounds. But, I got a lot of answers to questions, and I started, even though I didn't like some of the answers I got, as I said to you, I found it very hard to accept that he would go and leave his 2 kids with a mother with a serious mental health condition who didn't manage it properly, regardless of money. All right. So for me, you would have done whatever it could be to make money to survive over here, which he could have done, but he chose the other more glamorous route. But I got a lot of the answers to the questions that I needed. If he passed away and I didn't ask those questions, I would have a lot about myself that I wouldn't know, about his side of the family and all these other things. Excuse me. So I was really glad I did that. Now, look, what happened is, as we progressed through the relationship, so my mum passed in February, and we talked on and off until still now. But before Christmas, look, we were talking and talking, and I let him used to just go on his big rants about politics and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, look, this guy's got nothing. He lives in the middle of nowhere in Perth. I don't know what he does. I don't know if he's got any friends or anything like that. So I said, why not invite him over for Christmas? We just bought a new house. Be good to show him the new house, and that, despite him not being there, that I ended up doing it right in life. So I invited him over, and, it wasn't as a, look, same thing. When he came over, I expected he was going to be a certain way. He was going to apologize to me, grovel at my feet and be overly nice to me and all that sort of stuff. And it just didn't happen. So, what I had to do as well, as I said, is not put any expectations on any interactions. I just treat it for who they are, and naturally things happen, and as they do. So here's a picture of him here. If it comes up, cool. So there's a picture of him there. He's 77 years old, and this is in Warrnambool. So we went down to Warrnambool for Christmas. Look, and even in Warrnambool, there was things that were done and said by him that really got my blood boiling. But I let him go because that's just the way he is, and that's not what it's about. So sometimes you just have to put your expectations aside and just deal with things as they come. And sometimes people just can't change. But what you can control and what you can change is yourself and how you react to these sorts of things. And as I said, expectations of people, don't have them. It might sound like a very negative thing to say, but in this situation like this, when you've had an absentee parent, just don't build them up to be something that they're not. Deal with them as they are, or you will get disappointed. And as I said, I had really hard to practice patience. All the things that he said, these little things and these things like that. And it was very, as I said, very frustrating. But I'm not someone who meditates at the moment anymore. I used to be, but I can see why people do it. But it was something that I'm really glad I did. And I think if you don't have any expectations of that person, you'll be better for it. Now, in regards to how my life has improved, so why would you go and do this? Well, I could have had no interaction with him. I could have held anger and resentment to him, and then he passed away, and then maybe that anger goes. But I think a lot of regret would be there, because regardless of what he wasn't around, I would have so many questions, and I would be kicking myself for not trying. Now, if I tried with this thing and he, didn't want to be a part of my life or whatever, that's fine. At least I've tried. I'm not going to regret trying. And then I might have that anger back again, but I'm not going to regret not trying. What you don't want is you don't want regrets with these sorts of things. And because what happens is you have this, so this is time, right? Then you have this vortex here, right? So I'm still stuck here, and time's going like this, and you're getting it way and away where you want to move out of there. So that, quite often or not, you've got to be proactive. The one thing I think we're not enough as people is being proactive and having an ego pull us back to thinking, well, that person done the wrong by me. They need to come and apologize to me. They're the ones who need to make the effort. If you think like that, and that's the way I thought, you'll get nowhere. The person won't do it, and you'll be very disappointed. And who knows, 20 years goes by, 30 years go by, and you've got all this time that's gone, and you get to the end of it and go, oh, geez, I wish I was proactive. That's what I didn't want to happen. And quite frankly, I've wasted 22 years, really, not trying to have a father in part of my life. And that's quite frankly my choice. And it took me 22 years to learn a lesson. Hopefully you don't have to do that. But in regards to myself, it's definitely made me a lot more calm and feel more complete. As I said, I have a really good understanding of my mum's side of the family, but not his. So to actually know, where was he born and what's their background and what's their nationality, have a guess in the comments if you want, was really good. And a lot of answers about his parents and lineage and stuff like that. I had no idea. It was very interesting to hear, and about his career history. And when you go through it, I play guitar, right? So I'm going to pull this guitar up here. You can't hear it on the podcast, but on the video. So I play like guitar, and there's no one who's really musical in my family at all. And I found out that my granddad, my dad's dad, actually had a violin store and was a musician. So I had no idea about that. So these are the things where I learnt I wouldn't have known if I didn't take the action with it. And I also feel more calm. I'm not going to lie, I had a lot of anger and resentment towards him. And sometimes I've been told, people used to go to me, you got a chip on your shoulder, or you're always very negative. Well, if you don't know my story, yeah, for sure. But if you knew my story, you'd probably be going, oh, yeah, I'd be like that too. So, yeah, I'm definitely a lot more calm. I'm not as quick to jump to anger. And I'm really glad that I've got that part of my life which was missing sorted. And I didn't have to go to a psychologist or whatever to get the advice to do it. I just had to do it. I just had to make the hard action and do it. And it does suck. As I said, your ego will want to pull you back and say, they're the one who did the wrong by you. Why are you being proactive? And why are you the one making all the effort? Why? You don't have to do it. They have to do it. But as I said, if you expect the other person to make amends first, you're going to be waiting for a long time, and the opportunity is going to go. So be proactive, take action, and you'll be better for it. Now, look, the lessons you can learn, hopefully you've been picking up some things from it. But look, the main one I want to get across is, if I can, you can. Look, I'm not some bastion of, personal development guru or nothing like that. I'm just, a child of a mother who had serious mental illness and, a bit of hardship and adversity like a lot of people have in their lives. And I think I'm just a normal, average Aussie punter. So if I can do it and actually my thick head come to the realization that's me holding myself back from better things in life, which they were in this situation, you can do it. So there'll be situations in your life where someone's wronged you, whether it be a work, a friend, or a lost connection, and you've lost all this time because you don't want to be proactive and you think they're going to come and fix the situation. And your ego says, well, you shouldn't have to fix this situation. Don't be like that. Be proactive no matter what they've done to you. If the interaction doesn't go the way you want it, or you don't get what you expected, that's fine. You won't regret it. If you don't do it, you'll have regrets. Now, empathy as well, practicing empathy. Look, I think I knew what empathy was before, but I really practiced it with him. Looked at the situation from his side. I understand why he left. I don't agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. But I do have some sort of sense of really looking from his side of it, of how hard the situation was. And having conversations with him now, he said, he basically didn't apologize to me, but he said he regretted going to Saudi Arabia, which is what he basically apology, I guess, but he said he regrets it. So that was good enough for me. No expectations is the other thing. Don't have expectations of the interaction. Don't build it up in your head before you do it. If it doesn't go that way, you'll be disappointed and you might be pissed off. I recommend writing down some things you want to say to that person and just say them. But don't get too worked up by the other person as well. If you have expectations of them, you're going to be disappointed, in my opinion. If it goes every way you want it to go, fantastic. But if it doesn't, you won't be disappointed. Now, this is probably the biggest one that held me back and holds us back in a lot of things, and that is your ego. Like, as I said, this guy done everything wrong to me, yet I'm the one who's expected to come to him and be proactive and be inviting to him and forgive him and stuff like that. So your ego and my stubbornness said, no, he should be the one coming to me. But that never happened. So I had to be proactive about it. So take your ego out of it. It's there to protect you, I guess, in a way, because this person's hurt you or wronged you, and your ego is trying to protect you from being hurt or wronged again. But that's not progress, and that's just going to hold you back. So get the ego out of it and be proactive. And this is the one, a big one: be proactive no matter how right you are. That goes for anything in life, work, friends, relationships, whatever it is. Be proactive no matter how right you think you are, because if you're not, things can dwell and brew and you can lose a lot of time like I did. Learn from their mistakes as well. So if you're dealing with someone who maybe was not the best individual to you, they would have made a lot of mistakes which you can learn from. So for me, he was an absentee father. I can tell you that right now, if I'm a father with that privilege, because I think it's a privilege, I won't be absentee, no matter what happens. So I've learned from those mistakes and how damaging it can be to a child and to a young person. So for me, no matter what happens, hopefully me and my partner stay together for a long time. But if something happened, I would definitely be there. I'm not going to run away. So that's the lesson I've mainly taken from it, and how impactful a father can be on their child. It can be it's a really important role. And the outcomes for kids who don't have fathers is always worse than, 2-parent households. So I'm definitely, that's something I'm looking forward to and going to definitely put a lot of pride into. And being with someone who has bipolar is very hard. So look, people who have bipolar disorder, a normal, for me, my mum had bipolar disorder. She was a great mother. She was an awesome person. But when she got unwell, she got really unwell, and it's very hard to be around. And that was my situation. I'm not saying this is for everyone. Don't go to me, I've got bipolar disorder and I'm not like this and blah, blah, blah. I've had that happen to me a few times before. This is just my story and I'm sharing it from my perspective. And my mum, when she got manic and high, was very, very difficult. Very, very hard to bring her down. So it wouldn't have been a good situation for a loved one to do it. I've got a lot of respect for people who have a partner with a mental health challenge and they support them with it. I think it's a really, truly remarkable thing, and they do a lot of great work in the community and get no recognition in mental health awareness movement, unfortunately. So the partners of people with mental illness and mental health conditions, I applaud you. It's very, very tough. But look, my dad, rather than sticking it out, he knew how hard it was. He sort of chose an easier route, and that's the way he did it, and that's fine. And I can't blame him for it, because she was a great mother, loved her very much, but could be very difficult at times. And and that's where the resentment came as well. The burden fell to me. I'm the oldest kid, and she treated me almost like, I guess, like a husband at times in regards to responsibilities and stuff. So I had a lot of resentment because he sort of left me with the burden of responsibility in terms of emotional support, especially. But as I said, I've forgiven all that, and then that's moved on. And look, the other one I haven't got on here, but I think this is the most important one, and I'm going to literally, if I'm allowed to type it right now, I'm going to type it. So I'm going to type it on the screen. So this is live and this is one take, no editing. But it's forgiveness. Hopefully I've spelled that right. Now, forgiveness for me, look, it's generally associated with religions or Christians or Catholics or whatever your religious denomination is. But forgiveness for me, it just gives you so much power back. He had all this power, or that situation had this power over me with anger and hate. And as soon as I just decided to forgive him, this wave of emotion went away from me, and this anger, and it just made my life better. It's just literally a decision like that. So forgiving people who do the wrong thing by you is really, really important. As I said, my ego and my stubbornness sometimes be like, stuff this person, they've done the wrong thing by me, and just have this bitterness and anger to them. But that power of forgiveness, look, I think it's a Christian virtue or whatever it is, but it ain't no joke, and it really works. So forgive those who have done the wrong thing by you, move on with your life, and you'll be far happier for it. And for me, that was definitely a bit of a realization, and something I need to practice a lot more with a lot of different things. Now, look, thank you very much for listening to the end of this, and you've watched the final. If you watched up to this on YouTube, thank you very much. Look, I do this in one take. I don't edit it because, I think there's some sort of authenticity you lose when you edit it. Obviously, production quality might not be his best, but I think you're hearing my thoughts as they are. I'm not censoring anything, and you can hear it as is. If you did watch the video, I really do appreciate it. If you did listen to the podcast, please make sure you leave a rating and review. If you do want to be a guest on the show, go to livedexperiencepodcast.com. I'd love to have you on. I've got 3 new interviews coming up this week. I'm looking forward to releasing them. And if you've watched and listened to the end, thank you very much. And until the next episode, I hope you have a great week.